second session, and I welcome wholeheartedly to all the presenters and also the participants. So, as per the instructions of organizers, we give 5 minutes to each presenter to discuss about their work, and then we take questions and suggestions. So, I would like to call the first presenter, who is
is he there? The first presenter, Sefo Munakhadi.
I cannot see, sir. I cannot see. Then I think we should move to the next one. If he joins later on, we can accommodate. Sir, with your permission, we can move to the next presenter.
Yeah, you please go to the next.
Okay, so now I call. Yeah.
Dr. Namrata, please unmute.
Hi.
Yeah, you have your presentation was already okay. I think the first presenter is also there. So should we begin with him or should we begin with Namrata?
No,
Then
okay.
I think we follow the sequence, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So since I'm so sorry, Namrata, we will come back to you.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So I would request Sefo to kindly unmute and present yourself in a present and make a presentation in about 5 minutes. So your detailed presentation was already there in the website, so people have seen. So very quickly, in about 5 minutes, you kindly summarize.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Tsapo Mnakedi. I'm from South Africa with a PhD student with the University of Witwatersrand. Well, my paper is about non-state actors. And in particular, I argue in the paper that a large focus when we debate non-state actors has largely been on what one can term formal non-state actors. So whenever non-state actors are debated, there's almost a bias that tends to go towards what one can call formal non-state actors, and these are non-state actors that primarily function through formal institutions or have a relationship of sorts with the state. So what I argue is that it's important for us to be deliberate and also focus on what one can call informal non-state actors. So these would be non-state actors that often don't have any link whatsoever with the state and play a pivotal role and a contribution in the governance of cities of the global south, particularly in relation to public goods such as security and environmental management. And in this case, I cite my PhD study, which is looking at informal car guards in the case of Johannesburg, South Africa, where the preliminary findings show that they play an important role in the security of the city, not necessarily as a private good, but also the good. So I think in summary, that is the argument that I make in my paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Sefo. So now I request Namrata.
Thank you, Anjan, and thank you everyone else for joining this session today. So very briefly, what we are trying to do in this study, and my fantastic Arya and co-author is right here, Rana, the two of us, what we are trying to do here is there has been a lot of discussion around informal sector workers and how there is a lack of understanding around their well-being. There are some studies that we found in the Indian context which try to get to understand what these aspects of well-being are. Many of them are qualitative, and where we make a big contribution is that we are bringing this massive time use data set into the picture. And this is a much bigger study actually that we are doing, and this work on informal sector workers is just a small part of it. And we're trying to tease out how exactly do time use patterns look for informal sector workers, in particular domestic sector workers, casual workers, and self-employed. What the time use survey allows us to do is come up with very detailed definitions for every kind of occupation and very detailed definitions for different activities that time is spent on. And broadly, we draw upon a theoretical framework which brings in three different strands together. So we have the classical household theories which come from Becker. In addition to that, of course, we have the capabilities approach, which talks about people's agency also over the choices that they make as to how they want to utilize their time. And then finally, we also draw upon the sociological take on time use, which talks about border theory and how people could be crossing borders whenever they're engaging in any kind of, say, a productive activity, for instance. So even in terms of a theoretical framework, we are drawing upon various strands. And our main findings are that if we look specifically at domestic, casual, and self-employed workers, they are more overworked. That is an empirical contribution that our paper is making, which is that we have four very different concepts of time poverty. We have overwork, we have multiple activities, we have simultaneous activity, and we have less than median leisure time available. So we have these four definitions of time poverty, which previously no other study in any context actually has done. In addition, our very detailed time use and activity variables also allow us to add a lot of detail. So when we say that domestic, casual, and self-employed workers are overworked, all of those are coming from these specific definitions that we are using. Women, domestic and casual workers in particular are more overworked when it comes to any kind of a woman in a wage work. And we also use a smaller data set which was published in 1998, which was also a time use study, but only on 6 states. So the main data set is a nationally representative data set, but we use the other smaller data set just to see whether the trends overall, has there been any improvement in, if we talk about well-being from a time use perspective for informal workers, has there been any change? In particular, has there been any improvement, meaning they're experiencing less time poverty? We don't really find any such. Essentially making us reach the conclusion that the work environment for informal workers hasn't really changed much. The kind of welfare that they need, the support that they need, hasn't really been as effective. So those are the conclusions that we draw from our study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Namrata. Now, I invite the next presenters. And okay, on the topic formalizing the informal by legalizing the festive time street trade of Delhi by Professor Soma Sen Gupta and Dr. Monica Prabhakar.
Good evening, everybody. From India, it is good evening. Yeah, and good afternoon to others. Okay, we are talking about the formalizing the informal by legalizing the festive time street trade of Delhi. Philosophical and legal dimension. Now, you know that in India, street trade is inevitable, and they are very much part of our whole being, and you cannot actually do without them or eradicate them. So, but the question is, should it be allowed without any legal framework? Though we have a legal framework, there is an act known as Street Vendors Legalization. Street Vendors Legalization Act is there of 2014, and many provisions are there, but it was not implemented properly. And it's been like 6 years since it was promulgated, but still we find that street traders, they are facing different problems, and also many a times they are creating problems for the municipal commission. So there is a two-way problem for the vendors as well as for the implementers of the law. And we find that although it is the economic right of everybody to prosper, to do business, and it's a constitutional right as well, but what is happening actually in reality is, since they are not regulated and monitored or given a legal sanctity as such, and because of that, the street traders are facing different problems, like their goods are confiscated. Many a times they have to pay a huge amount of bribes, and in fact, other provisions are not provided, like facilities are not provided to them. So the objective facilities, like basically to the right to say a proper toilet for them, or a night shelter for them, those who are coming from outskirts of the city, they don't have a safe space to stay. And moreover, women and children are also involved in this type of trade, and safety concerns are there for them also. And also that leads to some congestion in the roads, and you find that criminal activities also happen. So how to monitor and how to regulate them? So this problem is there, and of course it is there, but how to devise a way to regulate them, that is the main objective of the whole of the study. Now, if we come to the conclusion, or basically in this study, what we did, we discussed the different arguments in favor of street trade, and especially the festive time street trade, which is inevitable. You know, India is a country with numerous festivals. Ongoing basis, one or the other festival goes on. And these people from different states, they come to Delhi, a city like Delhi, where they sell their whatever offerings are there, but there is no regularization of the trade. So this is one argument. And another argument, as I discussed, that economic freedom should be there. So what we found, that there is a proper act in place, but the implementation is a major concern. Here we talked with the street traders, municipal authorities, urban and town planners, legal experts as well. And we did a little bit of literature review. We talked with the vendors and we found out the problems they are facing. We talked with the authorities and what are the problems in implementing the law. So these things we have discussed. And then what hurdles we found, that basically, you know, that India's the major problem is that there is a huge population, and there is an apathy on the part of the municipal authorities. And because of that, the street trading is going on in an unorganized manner. Space constraint, mismanagement is there. No solid plan or law is there to manage or channelize the street trade, and the different authorities or the stakeholders are not, in fact, not participating totally in regulating this problem or finding a solution for this problem. So, and moreover, the traders are uneducated, and their attitudes are rigid. They are not properly educated how to apply for a license, proper license from the authorities. And many a times they don't have even that much of money to pay to the authorities. So shortage of funds is also there. And political parties also, they actually politicize this issue. And in fact, if they want to go against the ruling government, whether at the state level or the central level, they politicize this issue rather than finding a concrete solution for this problem. So that is one thing. Then another is that when we talk about the act, the Street Vendors Regularization and Legalization Act is there. In that, although they talked about forming, first of all, they have given the act provides some rights or authority to the state government to regulate this thing, empower them to protect the vendors' rights. In that line, they have created town vending committees also. And there are different members of different categories of people who become the member of the TVC, that is the town vending committee. But when, and these members are like 40% of the members are from the street traders only. And in that also, there is some reservation, like 30% out of that 40% will be for women members. And then people belonging to deprived classes like scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is there. Also representative from traffic police, medical officer, planning committees, authorities, associations, NGOs will also be member of this TVC. But again, as I told you, the problem is of implementation. These TVC committee, they don't meet regularly. They in a unified way, they don't want to find out a solution for this problem. So should we do away with this street vending, which is in fact considered as a menace by many people? There are certain arguments, philosophical arguments being given by Monica Prabhakar. I would like her to add her viewpoint on this topic. Monica, over to you. Monica, you are on mute.
Ma'am, you have to unmute.
Yes,
Monica, ma'am, you have to
yes.
unmute.
Okay, fine. Okay, so good afternoon. Oh, okay. So my concern has been with regard to the responses, the possible responses that we can, think of, and which are generally suggested in the philosophical world. And among those responses, one which is generally thought of as important is what is called resentment. Like there is resentment against these people, and not just others having this resentment kind of an emotion towards them, but these people who are those who we call the have-nots, they have resentment against the society also. So there is this response which could be from either of the two sides. Then there is the second kind of response, which is called resignation, where the people, others as well as the street vendors, they could say, okay, resignation is what we have for us in store. As in, so, okay, fine, this is our situation and we have to accept it. And slowly and gradually they begin to live with that and understand their situation, and maybe think that probably next year things will be better, next month things will be better. So it is kind of living with the way it is. So, and others, the haves or the fortunate ones, they could also, adopt this sort of a response towards these people of resignation. They also do not think much about them. Okay, fine, they have a life, they are downtrodden, they are poverty stricken. It's fine, okay with us, as long as, they are surviving, it's good for them. Then the third kind of response is endorsement, where, some sort of divinity comes into play. So it is the will of God. So I have to align my will with the will of God. And since God has thought this sort of a situation for me, okay, fine. So I have to live with this. So, these are the three kinds of responses with which, people can, live their lives. But I guess, that's not all. We have to think higher and above and be objective regarding this whole scenario. And the response that I could find after reading Swami Vivekananda, and it is called the response and I want to highlight it. It is resignation and service. So this sense of service, this emotion of service is, quite highlighted in the Indian tradition, in Indian philosophy. We have forgotten this, over time. But if we go back to tradition, if we go back to our culture, this is what our culture is. The culture of service. We need to think of these people as one with us, because we are a country of unity in diversity. They are not different from us. We share our souls. So we can't be, thinking on a separate realm. We have to be one with them. And which is why, as Soma suggested, that we have to work on some solutions. She has gone into the details of the legality of this. And I guess over to you, Soma. You can enlighten us more on this.
Okay, finally, concluding the whole of our presentation, that obviously we have to give recognition to the street trade as such, and festival time street trade in particular. Actually, street trade is still a little more legalized. But when it comes to festival time street trade, it becomes heavy, because people are coming from far-flung areas for say 15 days in our city, and then the problem begins. So it is not only giving recognition to street trade as such, but also giving some kind of like licensing to for festival time street trade, and demarcate the area or the space, provide basic facilities to and sanitation facility to the vendors, and also implementing the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act 2014 in letter and in spirit. That is the final conclusion of our study. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Soma and Monica. We open the floor. Satyan, we open the floor for questions.
Yes, sir. Yes. So
okay.
The floor is open for questions and discussion. So should we go one by one? So we start with the first presentation. If the participants, they have any inputs or any suggestions or any questions regarding the first presentation by Seppo Monakedi, that is based on non-state actors.
Yeah, Namrata has a query.
Yeah, so
Namrata, please.
I had a quick question in the sense, you have eventually mentioned that there should be a merging of non-state and state actors, but you haven't pushed us in a direction of how will that be possible, right? Because there is a reason they're separate. And how will there be an eventual merging, let's say in the context of Johannesburg, which is, or South Africa in that area itself?
Sorry, I completely missed the first part of the question. I think my internet was a bit unstable. Sorry about that. Could you just repeat?
Sure. So can you hear me now?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. In your presentation and in your paper, you have eventually concluded that non-state and state actors should join and form a more common ground in the way that they deal with, let's say education. But you haven't mentioned how will that actually take place, because there are various reasons for their separation as is outlined in your big paper as well. So could you throw some light on that, and let's say in the example of Johannesburg, how will that actually look like in practical terms?
I heard you, but I'm not sure if I heard the critical part of the question. Maybe if someone can clarify that for me.
Well, what we are trying to say here, that here you have said that there should be, a kind of merging of non-state actors and the, state actors. But how could that be possible? Obviously, they are separate because of certain regions, right? So, means how is it possible that there is merging of these two separate entities? Means there can be dialogue, there can be some, common ground where both of these, separate entities can put forward their own opinions, and there can be a common ground. But obviously, means the state actors and the non-state actors, they cannot be same. So how do
Shepo,
you see that?
Namrata has written the question in the chat box. If you
Yes,
can
yeah,
read.
let me read that. Thank you.
Yeah, the chat box.
Yeah,
She has written the question in the chat box.
Yeah. Let me just see it. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the question, Namrata. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Maybe let me just emphasize the point of the paper. So in the paper, the main emphasis is on non-state actors. And the idea is not necessarily calling for a merging with state actors, rather that when it comes to non-state actors, they are non-state actors that primarily function through formal institutions of the state. So for example, we're talking about normally NGOs and the likes, and then there are informal, what I term informal non-state actors, which the contribution thereof to development and governance of cities is largely ignored, because they function through informal institution. So now what the paper is calling for is that whilst it's important to recognize the non-state actors that function through formal institutions, it's also important to be deliberate when we look at informal non-state actors, so that they receive the same kind of attention in literature and in policy as well. So so that they receive the same kind of attention, to avoid a situation, for example, where the contribution of informal waste recyclers to the broader public good is not ignored. So in a sense, and as I was also listening to the last presentation through YouTube, I could draw certain parallels, but also contradictions in a way. So in a sense, what the paper calls for is not necessarily that the informal non-state actors should be formalized, as the last presenter was in a way making a case for the street traders in India. So it's not calling for them to be formalized, but rather it's saying that it's important to recognize that these informal non-state actors, like informal waste recyclers, like informal cargers, they are part of the city, and it's important that we give this specific area of non-state actors all the attention it deserves and scholarship, so that we can understand how they function, but importantly, so that we can also recognize the contribution that comes with it, without necessarily delving into an area where we have to, in a sense, formalize them through policies of the state. So in a way, it's making a case that maybe the way sometimes we should imagine cities of the South in the near future, we should imagine them existing within informal institutions, and not necessarily always trying to, in a sense, bring them to formal to formal institutions where they have some relationship with the states, because as it is right now, they exist in the cities and they make a significant contributions in terms of environmental management, in terms of security. So now we must find a way really of working within informal institutions in scholarship, and just really bringing them to the front of scholarship, that when it comes to non-state actors, we're not just talking about NGOs, but they are also informal non-state actors. I hope I've tried to clarify the study. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sepo.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Are they doing anything like related to that? Is the related to the question being asked by Namrata? Is there the concept of public-private partnership is happening over there in this sector?
Yes, no, definitely. And that's the point that I make in the paper, that so the link with the state, as I understand it, is that sometimes it can be strong, sometimes it can be medium, and sometimes it can be non-existent. So the medium, to an extent, we talk to what we're talking about. But now when you read the paper, the analysis, the theoretical analysis, which one looks into how these informal state, non-state actors function, I analyze them through the theory of co-production. So in a sense, they are, in a sense, when you look at the literature on co-production, that's the argument that that I make, is that there's an inherently bias towards defining co-production using there is some sort of relationship with the state, not recognizing that they are these other informal non-state actors that contribute to the public good, but are not given the recognition. But just in addition to that, in conclusion, and one should also understand the paper within the theory of understanding informality as a side of critical analysis, where the point really is to try and analyze the informal non-state actors, not from an economic perspective, not from a livelihood perspective, but from a governance perspective. And the other point that it's emphasized in the paper is that it's important to do that, because then it shows that there is more to informality than livelihoods and an economic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Seppo. If we have any more questions for Seppo Monakedi. Now we can move to the next paper. That was by Namrata. So the questions and suggestions are welcome.
Hi, Namrata. Hello. Very nice presentation and nice topic it is. But my question to you is, what is your solid suggestion for like female? You said that female casual workers, they and the self-employed workers are more likely to enjoy less leisure time, and they are overworked, and they are actually long working hours are there for them, and they are not paid that well. So what is the final solution to it? And if it is an informal sector, obviously the different acts like Minimum Wages Act and Equal Remuneration Act will not apply on them since they are informal. So the question of implementation of any of the provision of these acts are actually not applicable to informal sector. So what is the solution, final solution for that?
So thank you for the question, Soma. So one thing that we are not really doing here is to enter the territory of recommendations, precisely for that reason. So even before we wanted to get there, that was the reason why we also looked at the 1998 data, although it covers only 6 states and is not nationally representative. And what it clearly shows is that there is so little that has changed. Although between that time and now, there have been a lot of labor reforms. In fact, even worse, overall trend of informality seems to be reversing, in the sense that we are seeing more informality. We are seeing more people entering in these occupational categories than what it was before. And if you ask me, I think this trend is only going to keep going up now that we have more, delivery people, because there is no definition given to them yet. And there is no labor protection given to them yet. So we are sort of restraining ourselves from drawing any sweeping policy recommendations from these findings. It is more about highlighting, one, overall, that this is the time poverty trends. Second, that between these 2 time periods, we don't really see that much has changed. And from the time poverty results, we also want to highlight the fact that no matter how you look at it as overwork, you look at it as being, having less leisure time. from different ways it kind of stands out for informal workers. So in a way, that is a conceptual contribution that we are making. And also because of the detailed categories that we are able to identify, we can also say, very differently from what has been done before, as to how informality itself is so different in each of these categories. So a female domestic worker clearly is picking up a lot of the load of the unpaid domestic work and caregiving, which say a self-employed worker may not be doing. So we are able to highlight those kinds of differences, and that is really the objective, to really deep dive into understanding informality through these various categories, and also their well-being through these various definitions of time poverty. So we have not quite deliberately gone into the direction of saying whether or not broader labor reforms and how they should be informing. We stop at highlighting that nothing has changed and saying that these things need to be changed.
Although there is an act which is covering, I think, casual workers also. Like they have a provision that they will work for not more than 8 hours a day.
Right. So in some places there could be, say, local government level laws or requirements for minimum wages, for minimum work hours, and so on. But this goes, so this goes much beyond that in many ways, because what we also want to highlight is that informality itself is so diverse. Right? So you can't make a very sweeping suggestion that something that needs to apply to domestic workers will also need to apply to self-employed workers.
Yeah, and
they are having like different characteristics, and it's different kinds of activities because of which they are time poor. And I think that's the idea, that we need to look at these categories quite separately and distinct from each other.
And in a country like India, where there is a huge working population or people available, the supply of labor is more than the demand. Right, then naturally we cannot talk about all those rights. Thank you very much. Thanks.
And one more thing I should highlight, it's not mentioned very explicitly, but there is another part of the analysis that we have added where it allows us to in fact identify the location of work as well, for even wage workers, not just for informal workers, but for even wage workers. And that kind of points to what we're looking at in terms of future of these different categories of workers, depending on the location, whether you're working from home or not. And then the time poverty trends again stand out quite starkly, where the formal workers working from home are just as worse off as the informal workers, who are doing domestic and casual work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Namrata. Now we can move to the last presenters. The broader theme was about the street vendors. So if anyone has any suggestion or comments, please.
Can I jump in? I don't see the hand option.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed the YouTube videos for both presentation. I was intrigued by this one as well as the last one. My question relates to the recommendations, I think, in a sense that and I think I touched on it in a way, when you advocate for the formalization of through governance policies of the state, doesn't that in a way open up the process again, where you find that you legislate for street vendors that exist, and once they occupy even spaces that have been allocated, then the same kind of street vending, the informal one, then comes through. So new people enter that market that has been left, that was left by the people that have been in a way absorbed into the formal system of the state. I hope I'm clear enough on
Yes,
the question.
yes, yeah. Thank you for the question. I will take it. Now, you're very right. First of all, I think from the right from your presentation, you were talking about like legalizing such type of informal economy. You are not in favor of that. I guess what I found out from your presentation also, that you are saying that legalizing is not a solution. But in a country like India, when you do not regulate a particular kind of trade, then naturally everything is out of control because we have a huge population. And of course, you are right that we cannot stop people from coming and taking up those spaces which will be vacated by people who will now move to the regular space. You are saying that if a regularized space is provided to the vendors, but other people will occupy that space. I believe you are saying that. Now, you know that implementation of law is very important. And in a country like India, it is very difficult because it needs the will of the implementers and a partnership of all the stakeholders. Because it is just like a flow, and you need to stop the flow by implementation of that. That is the main thing. If you do not stop them, then naturally they will again take up, and congestions will be there on the road, and filth will be there here and there on the road. And so because of that, what I was suggesting is there is already an act. The only thing is to implement it in letter and in spirit. And for that, again, as I told you, the partnership between all the stakeholders is very important. And you cannot just, if you don't find out a solution for this, if you say that, yeah, it is their legal right, and if you don't give a solution to them, then naturally they will be also exploited. So what we are suggesting is that, yes, they have an economic right, but it should be channelized in the right direction. And the monitoring agencies and the licensing agencies should see to it that by paying a nominal licensing fee, they should be allowed to not only have their right, economic right, but also get certain facilities also. So when you are paying some money, so then it becomes a little bit of legal. So say for 15 days, if a nominal amount of 500 rupees or 1000 rupees is charged from them, then naturally the authorities can regulate them and provide them some kind of protection also. So it is very necessary that at this stage, this should be regulated. This is our suggestion. And in fact, many of the arguments in favor of this type of is available. In fact, it has been debated in different platforms. And this is the whole idea, that we cannot just keep them unregularized, though they are unaccounted for, though they are informal, but still they need to be regularized, in the sense a little bit of fee should be paid and some protection should be given. This is my argument. I hope it is clear to you.
Namrata has a query. Yeah, Namrata, please.
Yes. So the first question is whether there is a template that can be followed based on any other city in India, if you came across any successful interventions,
okay,
or from anywhere else, in the world for regularizing and formalizing this kind of street vending. And the other question was also, I mean, this is just, so how long does this typically go for? When you talk festive street vending, what's the time period that we are looking at on average?
Yeah, sure. Okay, the first part is that actually I came across one of the study conducted in Ahmedabad, and there were certain suggestions also, and to some extent they are following this. They have a town vending committee, and where the stakeholders are meeting and they are coming out with solutions for street trade in particular, not the festive time street trade. It is the street trade as a whole they are talking about. Here, our discussion or our paper is a little different, because we are concentrating more on festive time street trading, which is in fact more informal in the sense that there is no permanence at all. These vendors, they come and they vanish away. And they come from far-flung areas. We talked with one of the person who was selling rangoli colors during the Diwali time. A small kid from a far-flung village near Gorakhpur. And there is a contractor, labor contractor, who actually brings these people from those far-flung areas to a city like Delhi. Now, what I was talking about the licensing fee, like, I don't know from where, if you are from Delhi, you know that there is a place called Delhi Heart. Delhi Heart is there. So for 15 days, they have to pay a particular amount of money. And then the vendor has the right for a particular space, isn't it? Likewise, when festivals happen in our college, say a 3-day festival is there, we charge very nominally, say 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees per day for a stall. Okay, so that gives a right to the vendor to sell their goods or whatever offerings are there in those 3 days from that particular space. So likewise, this can be done for the festive time street vendors as well. And it can be demarcated by the authorities that from which date to which date for a particular festival, a license will be given. Suppose we are talking about a festival like Diwali. Say 10 days license can be given to the vendors, and a particular area can be demarcated to them. And there, by paying the licensing fee, they have the right to that space, and they can very well sell their commodities without congesting the road. That is and without actually misusing the public space. That is my contention. I hope I'm able to clarify both your queries. Thanks for the question. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
Satyam,
much,
can I
ma'am.
intervene?
Yes, sir, please.
Like what I have read through your papers, and I have understood that the greatest problem which we have with this informal worker is the paucity of data. We really don't know what proportion of the population is in informal activities, and so that's the biggest issue. And I believe Satyam has been working with informal sectors for years now. So he might be able to tell us that in a large country like developing country like India, almost 70 to 80% might be informal workers. So still
It's around
we really,
more than 90%, sir.
yeah, like more than 90, but yet we really don't have the exact magnitude of people. That's partly because these people keep on moving also. It's also seasonal. They come here for some months, and then they will go back, and so they're moving up and down. So really we don't have this clear-cut data. So that's probably is the greatest issue to address this problem of informal worker. And also in a developing country like India, the government cannot give they cannot give employment to everybody. So naturally, people have to look after themselves. And in such a scenario, informal sector is one sector which is here to stay. We cannot wish them off. And especially in big cities like Delhi, informal sectors is a very important part of our sector. If on a certain day, if the informal sector decides not to come out of their home, the whole city might be will come under standstill. So there will be nobody to work in our home. There will be no drivers. There will be no vegetable vendors. So all this issue. So that is why so informal sector is something which is there to stay, but we have to regulate. And for that regulation, we need data. So it's a kind of this very circular problem, one leading to another and another leading to other. So that is what I've understood from the presentations and discussions that have been happening. So Satyam, you can continue.
One point I would like to add that the government, it came with a web portal where informal workers, they can register themselves and they can avail certain social security benefits. So it might be an attempt to collect the data of informal workers, and there are many more things to come. There was a deliberation in Vivigiri Labor Institute, I think that is in Lucknow. So the government is working to formulate some broader policy directives for for these startups and for the gig economy, the gig workers. So hopefully soon they might come out with some broader policy frameworks where the startups or even the indirectly the customers, they might be charged for some rupees or in some paisa, and that will go to certain funds that will provide social security benefits to gig workers. So, sir, I think we have next session starting in 1 or 2 minutes. So we should conclude this.
Yeah.
So we both are really grateful to our participants and presenters for their insightful research work, and we hopefully soon be if our request for a special issue of journal is accepted, then I'll be writing to all of you for the full paper. So thank you so much, everyone. It was a great learning, hopefully to all of us, and we'll be in touch. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Our
Sheptu,
pleasure.
Thank you,
Namrata,
everyone.
Anna, Soma,
Thank you.
Monica. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.